So I think a really good sign here is that at the last official board meeting, there was a partnership between NHPS and NHFT to bring Educators Thriving to another group of teachers, which is personal learning to help those individuals manage the pitfalls that often lead to burnout. I think the fact that it was approved at our last meeting is a signal to our educators that this work of prioritizing well-being is being prioritized by our employer. And I think that is incredible. So I'm here today to call on all of us to build on this. Let's keep our collective focus on our well-being sharp. Let's listen to our educators. Let's check in with them often. And let's listen when they tell us what they need so we can continue to be responsive. I want to make sure that we are keeping our teachers with 5, 10, 15 years experience. We can't just keep recruiting. We must address the working conditions to keep our teachers with us in New Haven. Thank you, Dr. Joyner, and thank you, board.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Natalia Hampson. Natalia Hampson, you may speak.
Good evening, members of the Board of Ed. My name is Rosie Hampson. I'm a senior at Wilbur-Cross High School, and I'm also a member of the New Haven Climate Movement Climate Education Committee. Tomorrow, September 27th, is the 1-year anniversary of the passage of the Climate Emergency Resolution. It has been a year and enough action isn't being taken to implement this resolution. Meanwhile, climate change is continuing to wreak havoc and disasters worldwide. Recently, on September 10th, the torrential rainfall from Tropical Storm Daniel led to the collapse of dams and disastrous flooding in Libya. Tens of thousands of people have been displaced from their homes, and thousands have lost their lives, while thousands more are reported missing. Unprecedented flooding has also been occurring across China and India, where relentless rains and monsoon flooding have led to the destruction of homes and claimed countless lives. Cyclone Freddy in February was the longest lasting and highest energy tropical storm ever recorded in history. As the climate warms and the atmosphere is able to hold more moisture, such extreme rainfall events will only increase. We have also seen impacts locally, as Vermont was flooded by 8 inches of rain in a single day. A severe heat wave swept the United States in the hottest July ever recorded, and smoke from Canadian wildfires caused dangerous levels of local air pollution. These are just a few of the many extreme weather disasters of 2023. Since the start of this year, we have been hearing of one climate disaster after another, and we haven't been hearing enough about climate action. With so much destruction occurring across the world in less than one single year, it is urgent that we take strong climate action. When we met with the Board of Ed in June, we learned of your plans to implement points of the Climate Emergency Resolution, including composting and recycling pilot projects, food donations, and conducting energy audit in NHPS buildings. These projects will greatly help in reducing our food waste and combating greenhouse gas emissions. However, we haven't seen these projects implemented yet in our schools, so we need the Board of Ed to stay true to its promises and ensure that these projects are implemented. To do this, we are asking that the Board of Ed allocate $300,000 of their annual budget toward the hiring of climate staff, specifically hiring an energy coordinator, a climate education coordinator, and a sustainability coordinator, who can all help with implementing and overseeing climate projects in NHPS schools. We must not forget the urgency of climate action. In the years since the resolution was passed, the world has continued to be devastated by alarming floods, heat waves, wildfires, and cyclones. All of these disasters are only going to worsen from here if we do not act, becoming more devastating, costing more lives, and threatening the lives of all children and future generations. Because of this, we need immediate action. Thank you. Have a good night.
Our next speaker is Young In Kim.
Good afternoon. My name is Young In Kim, and I'll be speaking on behalf of myself and Lila Klepner. We're both members of the New Haven Climate Movement who graduated from Wilbur-Cross this past June. And we're speaking today to urge the Board of Education to follow through with the points you passed in the Climate Emergency Resolution 1 year ago on September 27th, 2023. Climate change is an emergency and we need to respond to it as such. People's lives are being ruined currently due to climate-caused disasters. Already, 2023 has broken the record with the number of climate disasters that cost over $1 billion in damages each. This includes the catastrophic wildfires in Hawaii that killed around 100 people. The burned area encompassed over 2,000 destroyed or damaged structures. At the time of the fire, 16% of Maui County was in severe droughts, letting the fire spread rapidly. The fire displaced thousands of residents who fear the rebuilding process will be long and difficult, causing worry about where they will stay in the meantime. The burn area from wildfires in Hawaii has quadrupled in recent decades. The combination of invasive grasses that easily burn and climate change creating dry, hot conditions let the wildfires spread much quicker, causing unprecedented damage and casualties. Across the country from Hawaii, Florida just dealt with their own climate disaster. Hurricane Idalia hit the Big Bend region on August 30th with wind speeds up to 125 miles per hour. And the wind ripped roofs off houses and the rain caused devastating floods. And according to the IPCC, we can continue to expect the intensity and frequency of storms to increase. Studies have found that the most damaging US hurricanes today are 3 times more frequent than 100 years ago. The amount of hurricanes that have caused more than $1 billion in damages have doubled since the 1980s. Florida is not done recovering from Hurricane Ian that hit Southwest Florida the year prior. Thousands of people are still displaced. Florida has 8,346 miles of shoreline and will continue to be plummeted by storms, and this continues to be an emergency. And even in New Haven, schools had to dismiss students early because of the unprecedented heat waves in September. The heat affected millions of people in the Northeast, and the effects of climate change are clear. In the 365 days since the board passed the climate emergency resolution, we have not seen the Board of Education follow through. It is not enough to say that action will be taken. We need immense and thorough climate action now, from educating students of New Haven Public Schools to actively making the school district more sustainable. The New Haven Climate Movement is asking for $300,000 to be allocated from the BOE budget to hire climate change staff.
Time.
Thank you, and we look forward to hearing about your plans.
Madam President, that concludes the raised hands.
I'd like to thank the commenters for respecting the rules of the public comment. Thank you.
Here.
We're not able to hear you. Would you like me to chair while you work out these issues?
Yeah.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what happened. Okay, so the next item is the approval of the board meeting minutes for September 11th. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote to approve the board meeting minutes of September 11th. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
and Dr. Yarborough is not on. Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
are the students on? No. Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well, so that item passes. We'll move on to the personnel report, Dr. Negron.
Good evening, board. I ask that you hereby approve the recs that have been submitted for hire.
Madam Chair, I
Dr.
move to
Joyner?
approve, I move to approve the superintendent's personnel report.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll vote to approve the action items of the personnel report. Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
yes,
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well, and those items pass.
Madam
And we'll
President,
move-
if I may,
Yes, Dr. Negron, go ahead.
I just wanted to call attention to one of the retirements that are listed, and that is Principal Mia Duff. Want to thank her for her years of service to the New Haven Public Schools. And I know that she's going to be missed greatly. Personally, I had an opportunity to work with her at the time that she was an assistant principal at Hill Regional Career High School. And I know that she's looking forward to moving on to the next journey in her life. So I just wanted to take this opportunity again to thank her for the years of service.
yeah.
Madam Chair,
Thank you, Dr. Negron. Dr. Joyner?
I'd like to say something about Mia. Mia was one of my kids at Hill House. She was one of the first rappers back in the day, and on the DJ club, and a kid that grew up in the Valley Street area, an honor student at Hill House, cheerleader, and a phenomenal human being. I actually have mixed feelings about her retiring because she's such an exemplary role model, especially for young girls. But she has her own family, she has her own life, and of course, she's given us so much good service over her tenure in the district. She lives right down the street from me, and I see her often. But I love her so much. She's such a great kid. Actually, she came to my retirement. And we're going to miss her, but that's another example of homegrown talent, Hill House High School, who has stayed in the city to give back. And I wish her Godspeed as she moves forward in life, as well as her husband, who's a retired police officer, police captain. So if you're out there listening to me, I love you dearly. And hopefully we can find some more people like you to help us fight this enduring battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Benitez?
Yes, I just wanted to congratulate Ms. Duff for her very prosperous career. I happened to teach with her when she came to Fairhaven. And her first position that I met her at, she was teaching dance because Ms. Duff was part of the Alvin Ailey dance group in New York City before she was one of our teachers. So she was a very talented dancer, but most incredible was that she was even more talented as an English teacher. We co-taught for a few years, and that was the emotional, it was guidance and English department doing work to help kids understand their emotion. And so I have to say she was a pioneer of letting support into her classroom so kids could shine. So she will be dearly missed, and I know that I will enjoy her company quite often now.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move on to the next item, which is finance and operations. Mr. Wilcox?
All right, thank you. Before I move these items, just ask if anybody needs anything moved separately. Mr. Goldson? Number 3? Okay. And before I make that motion, I just want to inform everybody, we did, prior to this meeting, have a special Finance and Operations Committee meeting to take a look at 3 items. And there's going to be a special board meeting by Zoom this coming Thursday, I think at 4:30. So for the board to consider those 3 items, one of which at least is time sensitive and requires board action before the end of the month. Staff apologize for the inconvenience of this, but it is important to get these things done. I think the thing that's time sensitive is a receiving of a grant, so bringing money into the district. So just let people know that information should be posted. And so I will go ahead and move. First, I'd like to I move that we approve agreement number 3 with Power School.
Second.
Mr. Goldson? Thank you, Dr. Joyner.
Thank you, Madam President. I am going to vote against this item. It's for $47,000 for another fundamental tool that we need. I'm tired of approving these things, particularly since we're going to be looking very soon at a budget deficit cliff. And for us to continue to buy all these tools that we're using that have not increased our student outcomes, it's a problem for me. So I'm going to vote against this. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Mr. Wilcox?
All right, just to provide background information to the board, it was when we considered this in Finance and Operations Committee meeting, testimony received was that staff had been looking at this. This is scaled back. My understanding or my recollection is that this is targeting in high schools for this Naviance part of Power School, which is used by guidance counselors and helping students work through the process of career and career planning and college planning, so that we were saving some money because they looked at the usage data and wanted to target where it was actually being used. And so I'm going to be in support of this.
Dr. Joyner?
Madam Chair, I'm going to be in support of this. Quite frankly, I think there's sufficient evidence to suggest that Naviance does help improve student outcomes, particularly first-generation college goers, because it provides information that's available to them and their parents so they can make good decisions and perhaps choose the right institution that will allow them to matriculate. So I'll be supporting it. I know how vital it is at the high school level because my wife was the assistant principal for guidance at Hill House. And they use that to great effect.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. Perhaps if the evidence that Dr. Joyner has seen could have been seen by me, I would be voting a different way. But in the presentation that I looked at, I didn't see that evidence. So I'm going to, again, vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Dr. Joyner? Seeing no discussion, we will vote on the Power School item. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
Mr. Goldson?
No.
Mayor Elicker?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well, and so that item passes. Mr. Wilcox?
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and make another motion here, and that is I move that we approve the 2 abstracts, the remaining 5 agreements, 1 purchase order, and 1 contract.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the remaining F&O items. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. And so those items pass. And we'll move on. I'm guessing students are still not on, so we'll bypass the students report. Teaching and learning, Dr. Joyner.
I'm gonna defer to Dr. Benitez. I had a medical issue and she has, I can't say enough about her willingness to step in.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. I met with the team and one of the things that I must share with the rest of the board is that at our August meeting, which it was late August, we had discussed the need for principals to be more engaged with the curriculum team or the academic team so that we ensure that they had the training necessary to give good feedback to teachers. And I was very, very impressed with the report we received where the team, the academic team, in collaboration with each other, were able to schedule walkthroughs in schools to share with principals what are they looking for when they go into classrooms, therefore providing them the type of training that is it's on the job. And they were very good at bringing some of those principles. They're still working on that. It's going to take them a while. It's 41 schools, but the principals who came reported that it was really eye-opening to walk with the supervisors and to be able to look at instruction from somebody else's point of view and be able to align their views with the academic team. So that is something that is happening. I have to say that I was very impressed that this team is quickly listening to the needs of any of us. So even of the board members who want to see certain things. The other thing is that the youth, family, and community engagement team were able to discuss with us the work they are doing for improving the attendance of our students and removing barriers, how they are utilizing partnerships or partners in our community to support families. And one thing that I know they will be able to share with you is that not only are we improving things in our end, but we are also becoming more and more aware of the context of our district in our state. So that's pretty much it. To say the least, I am impressed with this academic team. I thought, I'm new at doing this chairing, and they were very graceful and very supportive of the things that I wanted to see. And of course, all of those things that I'm requesting are things that Dr. Joyner and I have discussed prior to the meetings. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Any questions or comments for Dr. Benitez?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to make a quick comment. I can't stop praising Dr. Benitez enough for her work, but I'd also like to single out the people on the district side and ask people to try to take a look at what we're trying to do for children in this city against the historical context that has been in place for such a long time. And quite frankly, any child in this district who works hard, who's respectful to their peers and others, and who wants to get an education, a good education, can get it. There are more things available to kids now. And I would hope Mr. Golson would even chime in on this, because if he had had all these opportunities that these kids had now, he was an honor student at Hill House. And all this money that honor students get to finish their education, I'm sure that he and every single member of his family, because they were all honor students, would have benefited. And I invite people to take a look at what was available 50 or even 60 years ago for low-income minority students, and take a look at what's available now. In fact, low-income minority, the descendants of those people are running these systems, and they are creating opportunities for all children, regardless to gender orientation, color, income, and what have you. And compared to the resources that low-income children get in affluent communities, if you're lucky enough to be in New Haven, you're in a good place. So I just like to thank the superintendent, the staff, the mayor, the board, and everybody that's busy working to try to create the best opportunities for these children that we can give them. I have grandchildren, great nieces and nieces in the school district. And last night I spent some time with a young man who is an honor student, and he's trying to get his stuff together so that he can apply for school. And he comes from a single parent family, relatively low income, but he's on the honor roll and he's in a position to get into some of the best schools in the country. He's also a great athlete. So I just like to thank people who are doing that. And I'd like to encourage families and children to look at the fact that the glass is really more than half full. And that if you come to school, you work hard, and you develop relationships with your teachers and your administrators, you're going to be served well. I just think we need to say that more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. I want to ditto Dr. Joyner's comments. As a student, I took advantage of every opportunity that I could in the school system, and there was a lot of opportunities. When I got older, I realized how important those opportunities were to my development as a person. And I'm very proud of this school system. I'm proud of the school system that I was a part of. I'm proud of the school system that exists now, especially the teachers. I'm worried for the school system based on what's happening in Washington and in a smaller part in Hartford regarding funding of to keep those opportunities coming. So I'm in real fear, and I hope in the future that other board members don't sit here with the same fear. I hope that eventually the state and federal governments commit to fully funding education the way it needs to be. I mean, those students that spoke today that graduated from the school system a year or two ago are impressive. And we've seen impressive students walk through here at every meeting. We have students that have served on this board that were very impressive, who have gone through this school system. And we see that there's a whole lot that we don't see, who are doing good things out there every day in school, supported by their parents, their families, and their schools communities. And I just hope and pray for a better future for the school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Golson. Seeing no further comments, we'll move on to Facilities Naming Committee report. Dr. Joyner?
Actually, our work is dependent on having someone on the school side to set up the digital petitions.
They're ready for you. They're ready for you, Dr. Joyner. I think they just need the information that you want uploaded.
Yeah. All they need to do is put move.org on the website, And then we can talk about getting the word out that the two people right now are Dr. Garrison. So if someone would call me, I'll be glad to do that tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Negron, can you have someone from IT connect with Dr. Joyner? I can't, got it.
Yes,
Thumbs
we
up is
will.
fine.
We will. We just need to make sure that we have the right name of the entity. So we'll connect, Dr. Joyner.
Okay. In fact, I'd be willing to come in to Fittsville Meadow to meet with them as soon as someone contacts me.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Joyner. Any questions or comments for Dr. Joyner? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report, Dr. Negron.
Thank you again for the opportunity today as part of my superintendent's report. I want to focus us on our priorities. And for that, I'm going to be extending an update related to where we are as it relates to student attendance, and also where we are as it relates to the implementation of our K-5 core program. So for that, I am going to be inviting 2 members of the cabinet who are instrumental in leading the work. So Chief Gemma Joseph Lumpkin will be supporting with the presentation on student attendance, followed by Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Keisha Red Hannons, and our Supervisor, Jennifer Tusignant. So I want to start as Gemma is gonna come up to the mic. And Dr. White, if we could get the slide deck up. Thank you. We can move to the next slide. And the next slide. Before I have Gemma begin to unpack for us what we have been doing, I want to offer understanding as to our district context. And specifically to call attention to how we compare to the state as a whole. So here you see where do we stand as it relates to ways that often we describe our level of poverty, often defined by the percentage that is eligible for free and reduced lunch. And right now that stands at a 65.5% compared to the state. And when I reference the state, please note that I'm using the data for last year because that is the data that is available. And that is a 42.4. Also calling attention to the percentage of students with disabilities, where we are pretty much aligned to what we see as the average at the state level. So we're at 17.1%. You can see that we far exceed the percentages across the state, where the state has a 9.7% of multilingual learners. We have a 22.1%. I also want to lift that right now we have 71 languages that are represented in our district. And when we look at, again, another state definition of high needs, meaning when you combine different categories that could be either free or reduced, or it could be student with disabilities, or it could be students with disability, any of those combinations, again, we far exceed the averages for the state. The state stands at 53.12, we right now look at 76.2. And I also wanted to throw in another context as it relates to the number of students that are experiencing homelessness. And right now we stand at a 3.7%. All of that because I want to make sure that the entire community is in touch with our realities. Not that I'm saying we're making excuses, because we are here to serve every single child. But again, I want to make sure that everybody understands the reality of what this urban district, which right now is the second largest in our state, how we open the doors, and we mean to serve every child that comes through our doors. I am happy to share in our next slide that it starts with making sure that students are coming to school each day and talking to our families about the importance that attendance plays on student success. And I am very happy to report that we have been monitoring our attendance every single day and looking at the average. And right now, this is what you see here. And brought you the data as fresh as today, where we stood at a 91.2% average daily attendance. And you see, we've been doing fairly well. Our lowest point was an 88.5, correct, Gemma? 88.5, which was those days that we had to call an early release because of the heat situation. But again, I invited Chief Gemma Joseph Lumpkin to come today and give us a little bit of insight as to the work that she and the team have been doing, which began in July. So Gemma.
Thank you, Dr. Negron. So we are taking a deeper look of, should I just pull this in? Okay, thank you. So we are taking a deeper look of attendance, specifically looking at chronic absenteeism. And those are the students who I say they are in between the days. So these are students who might show up in one of those 90 days and then might not show up the next day. These are students who represent missing 10% of days enrolled. And so we are looking to see what progress we have made, but also to set a realistic, smart goal as to where we believe we can land at the end of this school year. So you've heard us talk about our devastating start in 2021 at 58.2%. You've heard us many times come to you to share what we've been doing to reduce that number, and we were able to achieve that 36.6%. And after a review of our data and conversations with our team, we've landed at 27.5 as a realistic goal that we can achieve as we focus on our recovery. Next slide, please. So we pulled the data a few days ago to see where we landed. Remember, we're not 30 days into school yet, but we wanted to have an idea. We wanted to have a snapshot as to where we are in the recovery process. And you can see that middle number there at about 25.2%. That is a number that is encouraging. We cannot wait to get back to the days when we were in those teens and screaming, as you've heard me say many times. We want to get below that 10% chronic absenteeism rate, but we are encouraged optimistically that around now we are at 25.2%. Our goal is to bring that number down in order to hit that target, given what we know is ahead of us, such as cold weather, potential COVID, flu, respiratory diseases. It's important for us to keep an eye on those numbers and to focus on what we need to do with our families, engage our community partners, work with our students to keep that number as close to this or lower if possible. You can also see from this chart our critical numbers of kindergarten and ninth grade, where we see they have traditionally been our challenged grades, and that is an issue across the country. We are working very hard at kindergarten, which we know it's a family issue, a parent issue, it's a parental issue, trying to build those connectiveness and information to families about the importance of kindergarten, and working very hard at the ninth grade to ensure that our students there have what they need to be successful and to bring those numbers substantially lower than they are currently. Yes. President Rivera, I understand you've raised your hand.
I can wait until the end of the presentation. I just wanted to make sure that I'm in the queue for my questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So next slide, please. So we've been studying all along the reasons for absences. Our parent engagement team has been asking our parents as we report to them that your child have been absent, to tell us what the reasons are. And these reasons, illness being number one, is reflective of the number one issue that we see around the country. Vaccinations, meaning students need to be compliant with updated vaccinations to be able to attend school, followed by physical examinations. Those are our top three. We are working very closely with our health department. We're working very closely with our families. We're working very closely with our students to understand what those health issues might be, to ensure that there are health issues that are relevant to students being absent, especially in the early grades. So with the help of our nursing department training that we have been doing, we've been able to meet with the 42 nurses. We are asking them to help us in the outreach to families to make sure that students who may be ill have what they need to return to school as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. And so what are we doing to ensure that we are bringing those numbers down? You look at this little house, it represents our multi-tiered systems of support. And at the bottom where it says foundational supports, this is what we believe that every student should have. We actually borrowed this illustration from Attendance Works, which is internationally recognized for their outstanding work to support the reduction in chronic absenteeism. And clearly here we offer and provide and illustrate the areas that schools can control, such as the enrichment activities and clubs. I won't read it all, but positive relationships, family engagement, traditions and celebrations. And I can tell you that in every school, we are working to ensure that these opportunities are available to our students. On the tier 2 level, this is where we need to do further outreach to our families and our students to understand what the barriers are. And on tier 3, this is where we work with intra-agencies. We involve oftentimes the DCF, legal agencies, the justice, the criminal justice, the juvenile justice system, and other community partners to better understand and support students who are at that extreme level of attendance. Next slide, please. So the next slide gives a little bit more specific around how we are approaching attendance. So from the moment a child misses 2 or more days, we consider that an alert. And so our teachers and our school teams are making those phone calls to home to check in, to understand what the issues are. Oftentimes it's illnesses, or sometimes we turn those phone calls over to our nurses to help support our students and families, and to look at what other barriers there might be that we can provide additional supports to. On that 6 to 10, and we don't see a large number of students here yet. We hope not to get to this number anytime soon, but this is where we push in very hard home visits. We use what's described as LEAP here. It's actually the Learner Engagement and Attendance Program, which is a CSDE framework for home visiting. everybody participating in home visiting goes through that training. We also look to assign mentors at the school level to implement a success plan. We really like that SST model of student staff support team gathering around our students and our staff and our families to ensure that we can provide them with the support that they need. And then on our next slide, you will see, again, activities that are based on the level of days that students are out. And finally, on the next slide, we are progress monitoring every day. The cabinet receives a daily attendance report that Dr. Negron referred to, where we are able to see those hotspots where daily attendance are not at the level where we would like them to be, and to connect with those schools to ensure that they have the supports they need to improve attendance. And our district-wide attendance team meets on a weekly level to take even a deeper look. We spend an hour every Thursday to look at attendance on a school-by-school basis with a focus on reducing chronic absenteeism. And then finally, but critically, our school-based teams are also looking at daily attendance and weekly attendance and ensuring that we are providing the practices to improve attendance for our students. And that's the overview.
So before we go into the core program implementation, I think there was a question that perhaps we can answer.
So there were in one of the first slides, I think it had the dates at the bottom and some like the line graph. There were a couple of dips. One was September 7th, and I can't remember what the other date was. Was there anything significant about those dates, or that's just what happened?
So the one that was most significant was the 9/7, again, which was during the heat wave where we had failures happening and we had to announce the early release. So I making an interpretation that might have caused some of those absences on that given day. The other ones, I think, pretty much stand aligned because we've been hitting between that 88% or so, which again, today was exciting to see that now we're climbing into the 90s with that 91.2.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to be sure if there was anything else happening. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Joyner?
We certainly can't go into detail in a complex issue like this, but what I like to do is be able to talk to the superintendent and to Ms. Gemma about some issues related to this. So whenever you're available, and I'll just lay out a couple of questions. One, it was great for Dr. Negron to talk about the context of the students that we have in the context that they reside in compared to the rest of the state. But even within the district, there are unfortunately families who have a history of poor attendance, if it hasn't changed since I was a teacher and a principal. And so I'd like to know, what are we doing over multiple years to work with those families? And I'm not blaming anybody. And then the whole notion that teacher vigilance and principal leadership is critically important, because this stuff happens in buildings, and it's up to the people in those buildings to be on top of it, to be able to keep good data and to be able to explain to the superintendent and the people above their level why that is a problem. And then the last thing I like to talk about, maybe Dr. Benitez, you and I can have a meeting with, in TL, we can have this be a major part of our TL meeting. What kinds of incentives are there to try to get kids to come to school. And quite frankly, what are the sanctions when we have children who have no authority to come to school on their own when their parents are not sending them to school? And I know sometimes you don't want to do that, but quite frankly, you do have to hold people accountable. If they have school-aged children that don't drive cars and they can't walk to school, for getting them to school. If you're going to give us blame when we have poor attendance, then you have to give us the authority to compel people when they're not sending their children to school. And so again, we can't talk about it in a meeting because it takes too much time, but I would like to have some opportunity to meet with that staff and the superintendent to get some answers as far as this is concerned. And hoping Dr. Benitez can support the notion that we should bring this to the forefront through our teaching and learning. That has to be an agenda item on our teaching and learning. It actually should be a recurring item on our teaching and learning committee. Thank you. Good report.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mayor Elicker and then Mr. Goldson.
Mr. Golson had his hand up first.
Go ahead, Mr. Goldson.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mayor. Great report. Appreciate the information. This is very informative. Just a couple of quick questions on the first slide, where you show the city compared to the state. Is that last year's numbers?
The state.
Yeah.
For last year.
Okay.
Ours are for this, what we have right now.
Okay. Of course, it's for this year. The state doesn't have this year's numbers? Okay. Did I hear you say that we have 71 languages? That must be fun. In terms of the daily attendance on the second slide, you said 9/7 was a date when you had to close schools because of the heat wave. When kids are sent home early, does that count against attendance? So why would that dip? Because it wouldn't dip because we closed schools early. It would dip because kids didn't come to school because it was hot, right?
My interpretation is based on the fact that we announced the day before that we would be having 2 early dismissals. So I'm making an interpretation that for some might have been like, okay, we got out early today. That was a little bit of a struggle. And now we're going to be out early again tomorrow. You know what? I'm not going to go. And I say that because my own daughter, when she was coming to school and she knew about an early release, she's like, I'm not going to go. It's only an early release.
Did she go?
I made her go.
Thank you. I see the other dip was last Monday, and that was I'm wondering if that's related to anything also, that dip. I mean, it's not a huge dip, but it's about half of the dip from the 7th. And was there anything that happened? Okay. All right, great. On the third slide, I have to say that you are brave to set a target. I hope you meet it. I know you will. You guys have done a great job so far. On the next slide, I just had a quick question. You had chronically absent 4,800 and approaching chronically absent 36. Those are 36 is not in the 48 number.
Correct.
So that's what, 7, 8, almost 9,000 kids, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So remember that we're less than 25 days into the school year. So if you've missed 2 days of school right now, you're chronically absent. And if you missed a day, according to the algorithm, you're approaching.
Got it. Okay. Okay. All right. So we hopefully will see that second number
Reduce.
reduce
Correct.
as we go along in the years. The slide, reasons for absences. What is the difference between out of town and out of Connecticut?
So there may be students who have actually moved out of district. So it says out of town, it actually should be out of district. Those students have moved, and those students, we are working to get them off of this this indicator, but they're still there as we wait to update our data files. And then out of Connecticut, that means that they are literally traveling, visiting families out of the country or out of the state.
Okay. So the important number is out of town because that's a number that can disappear
Correct.
as you take those kids out of the system.
Correct.
All right. And the other question I have was around transportation and missed school bus. What's the difference between those two?
Transportation issues is when we generally see families that may choose for a student to go to another school while their children might be attending different schools. And so the buses may come at different times that may create a hardship for the family to get the students to the buses. So we work with families as much as possible to get their students together, but we would see those transportation issues float to the top if there are multiple students potentially attending out of district schools or other schools.
So is that the same as missed school bus also?
A missed school bus meaning they were late for the bus, couldn't get there, and so therefore couldn't get to school.
Well, how about when the bus doesn't show up? And we've been getting a couple of emails from people, especially one person who says that he's having a terrible time with the buses because they either don't show up or they show up an hour or two late, both on the front end and the back end. Is that factored into either?
That
any
is
of the
likely in the
numbers?
transportation issue as opposed to the missed bus issue. I would unpack that a little bit more and give some further clarification.
All right, so
on
we
that.
have to fix that for sure, right? If our kids are not getting to school because our transportation system is not working, then we need to maybe put that as a different category so we could see how that's affecting our attendance here in the school system. Thank you very much. In terms of the multi-tiered systems of support, the strategies around that, what do we do when everything we're doing doesn't work? Home visits, all this other stuff. What's left to do once we get to the point where parents are just not, or families are just not addressing this issue? Families are just not addressing these issues and children are just not coming to school.
Right. So, we don't have legal sanctions against families, but we actually do make referrals to DCF when we have zero response from families. When we make those DCF referrals, they ask us, what have you done? We have to list everything before they take the case. And then we make that referral for the DCF and other agencies to take action.
Are they taking action and are we seeing any successful results from them taking action?
In some instances, we actually do see with the DCF involvement that attendance is improved. What we know from our experience and from the evidence is when students are missing more than a certain percentage of time, they will actually increase their attendance with appropriate intervention, but not enough for it to reduce their chronic absenteeism rate. So they may go from 85% attendance to 86% attendance. We need students to be at 90%, 93% attendance. So there is that group of students who may be improving or are improving their attendance, not enough to pull them out of that chronic absenteeism category.
And just one other question. Once we get to the point of no return, 18 absences, which is 10% of 180 days that we're here. I mean, you can't get any worse than that, right? I mean, are these kids, are they moving forward to their next class level or what happens to them?
Well, so 18 days out of 180 days might not mean that the student is not doing well in class. It may mean that we need to give them additional help in some cases, but we have found that when we look at 18 days, there's a group of cusp kids. They miss just that one day of 18, and some of them are doing well. they are at risk because the research tells us that that many days puts them at risk. But that's the first group that we go after to say, hey, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days put you over the edge. And so we work very quickly to get those students. We spent all summer working on about 1,069 students or so who were just over that
All right.
category.
So I understand and I appreciate that answer. But then that raises another question. How about the kids that miss 25 days and the kids that miss 35 days? There is no category here for them. I mean, they're super extreme chronic absence. And is there something that's happening with those young people?
Yes, we're reaching out to all of our students who are chronically absent. And as I said before, we will see shifts in their chronic absenteeism, reduction in their chronic absenteeism rate, but not enough to show up in reducing our chronic absenteeism numbers. What we're tracking here is growth. This is where growth becomes super important to us. And the state doesn't officially report growth in chronic absenteeism, but they do look at it with us privately. And our goal is to say, okay, if you're 30% missing 30 days, we want to see that reduced to 15, 20 days. I will say that
How could that be reduced?
to less days. So rather than 30 days of being out, we want to see less days being out. So I use the number hypothetically. So from 30 days out to less, pick the number to less days out on a regular basis.
What you're saying is that once they get to that point, you want to see them not missing school, right? They can't reduce the number of days that they were out of school, but you want to see a decrease in their absenteeism. This is just for me. I don't know if anybody else wants to see it or think it might be helpful, but one day can we maybe see a couple of other rows there that show the super extreme.
We have that data because we're using that data
We can
to
get a sense of.
inform us on the interventions that need to happen. So yes, we look at that data on a regular basis.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is great.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Madam Chair, may I?
Mayor Elicker?
Thanks for the presentation. I just had a couple questions. And we'll start with a comment. So the chart on slide 2 with percentages, I have to imagine that the experiencing homelessness numbers are reversed and are in the wrong order, or they need to be corrected, because I'm sure that Connecticut has fewer students as a percentage than New Haven does experiencing homelessness.
So what I understand about this data is it reflects what our current chronic absenteeism rate is. I'm sorry, our current homeless rate is. And that number tends to grow throughout the year. So if you see a number that represents, I'm going to say hypothetically here, 300 students, that's what it is as of the day that we pull that data. However, that number will increase as we get to the end of the year.
So if I may, so that's a cumulative. So at any point that a student experiences homelessness, they're counted in that number. So it gets all added up, where what we're saying is we're very concerned because we're only talking about, we looked at this, we pulled this data last week. We are already at a 3.7%.
Okay, so if a student is experiencing homelessness, say for a day, in the year, they would count towards the total.
If they're going to show up as being identified as being homeless, they're going to show up in that data set.
Okay. So in that case, it's not really an apples to apples comparison, but I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. I also, it would be helpful to just have an idea of how we compare with last year at different times. Do you, and you may not know this off the top of your head, but last year at this time, what was our percentages for chronic absenteeism?
Chronic absenteeism.
Yeah.
So I don't have this time, but when we looked at the end of September, we were at about 44% chronic absenteeism.
And typically, because two days, my children are chronically absent because we were out sick for a couple of days with COVID. I would imagine you'd see a huge jump in the beginning of the year and then it would start to go down. Is that accurate?
It depends, but that is our hope. So if we see a high incidence of sicknesses around November, December, which we saw last year, that number could potentially increase. We also know that just the cold weather and different seasonal changes, we see increases, but our efforts have been to mitigate those, being aware of those periods that we see those peaks and to address them. So you will see from our data last year, those numbers did indeed follow that pattern and push down.
Jim, I just want to add, Mayor, but you're correct because it's always a 10%. So right now we're looking at September 26th. We count the number of days that we've been in session. So any child that has 10% or more automatically, they're in that chronic absenteeism. So as long as they're there now, the idea is we know who's there now. What are we doing to deal with the challenges so that they don't continue to be absent, because eventually we can get them out of being chronically absent. Because again, it's a moving target because it's 10% of whatever the total number of days are that we're in at that current moment. If that makes sense.
But if at the end of September last year, we were at 35% or thereabouts, that was not our peak last year. Our peak was 60-something%, wasn't it?
Our end of year was at, but comparing to now, end of September, we were at 45%.
Understood. The other question I had is, so the reasons for absences, so it surprises me that there are not reasons that are related to mental health, or because I hear just in these anecdotes of my child's afraid to go to school because of bullying. There's a child that needs to take care of their sibling. There is a disengaged high schooler that's just choosing not to go to school, and the parents may have difficulty getting them to school. And I'm not seeing that category in any of the lists that you have here for reasons for absences.
Yeah, the mental health category is linked into the illness category, and I agree that we need to unpack that and describe that in further detail.
I think that's it, because having COVID is very different than, or some illness that keeps you out of school for a handful of days that is difficult to fix for the district versus these other issues that obviously we could work hard to potentially address. So yeah, those are the only questions I have, but this is great data, and it's a huge step in the right direction. I think you've done a lot to kind of parse out what's going on, and that's helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Wilcox's hands are raised.
Mr. Wilcox?
All right, thank you very much. I also wanted to talk about that chart on the reasons for absences. That is, I had some similar questions, and also was curious, and I don't need the answer now, but in future presentations on this kind of data about what's the N, how many people is that reflecting in that data? Because I can only assume that this is the people that you were able to get answers from, as opposed to the unknown, the people that didn't respond or haven't been able to. And I think that that'll be an interesting category, because I imagine that's where some of the things that the mayor was mentioning and that we hear anecdotally about. And I think that that's perfectly good to have that unknown. That I don't think it's necessarily a poor reflection on staff aren't trying to find out, but just that, the nature of absenteeism, some people are not going to be responsive. So I think that, moving forward, I also did like the comments that you were talking about, the re-engagement, the turnarounds, the successes, students that were not engaging in school coming back. And I know that, at schools like Riverside, that is one of the things they're always going to show up poorly in raw data about absences, as opposed to when you do have people that were out, 9 out of 10 days in 2-week period. But then the next week, the next 2-week period, they came a couple more days and they're starting to react. And there's reasons behind a lot of that. So I do think that that's good. I don't know how to chart that kind of data. I know the state doesn't care about it or doesn't ask for it, but I do like that you all are looking at that. And then finally, one thing I just wanted to mention related to this is I'm really interested in accurate data. And I know that one danger when we concentrate on one metric, like what's the daily attendance rate. That's going to put a lot of pressure on building staff to fudge the numbers, maybe pressure on some teachers, pressure on other staff, pressure on principals. And I don't think that anybody that I've talked to on the board about this wants to look at that data that way, that we want to see what the data actually is. And that I just wanted to, name the risk of us concentrating on one number when that number is just, it's just reflection of other symptoms that we lose the power of that number if we don't have accuracy. So I'm hoping that that message is getting to building staff that sure, we're going to see issues where we're going to have hotspots in schools. For some reason, kids don't want to go to that school. And that's something we need to look at, but we don't want to hide those numbers. We want to see them accurately. So that's just a concern that I'm hoping is addressed as we move forward. Thank you.
If I may, Madam President, to respond to that.
Go ahead, Dr. Negron. Mhm.
So I think here it's trying to I want to thank the team, and I want to thank all of the classroom teachers, all of the principals, people at central office, because the whole idea here is that that we need to know where children are at, right? So it's having that fidelity to making sure that we are practicing good habits around attendance taking. And that, like you're saying, that's only one measure, because we want to see then how are we doing, what's causing it. That is why now when board member Golson asked the question related to, and President Rivera asked the question related to 9/7, right, that we want to track. So in the future, we know what are some of the things that are happening on a daily basis that may appear like have an impact around whether kids come to school or not. That's one thing. Just like we send out the survey, like, what's the barrier? How else can we help? So we're trying to have as much information as possible as we continue to think about, what else can we do to support? The whole idea is, can we find out what's in the way and what can we do to continue to support our families and our students to make sure that they are able to come to school on a daily basis, because we know that we need them there if we're going to have a chance in preparing them for what they need for the future. So I do thank you for that comment and for reiterating that. And again, all of that to say that we want to make sure that we are making decisions based on the data that we're able to collect.
Thank you, Dr. Negron. Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. I think the superintendent made some very great points. And I think the questions that the mayor asked around the different categories are great questions, are important for us to know what that information is. And this kind of shows, the barriers that we don't even imagine that could be put in front of our students to limit their learning and limit their attendance, right? I mean, we know a hot building, we can now go and say, if our mechanicals break down in the building, we may lose 2, 3, 4, 5% of our students that day for attendance. And if it continues over several days, it could be even worse. So that just goes to show our funders and our community how important it is to keep our mechanicals up, right? And how important it is for that department operations to make sure they do what they're supposed to be doing. Buildings, if windows are broken or won't close in buildings, which we saw years ago, where teachers were putting boxes in front of windows in the winter time to keep the cold air from coming in. I'm sure that affects some kids' ability to want or desire to want to attend that class, right? I mean, if we start tracking what barriers are put in front of our students, it helps us to go back to our funders to say, hey, if we can't have a good mechanical heating or cooling in our buildings, it actually affects our attendance. and then it affects student learning. So I am so happy that you put this report together. I'm looking forward to seeing the next one and seeing it updated with some of the questions that we asked, and thank you again. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Golton. Okay, move on to the next item, Dr. Newton.
Yes, thank you. So again, that was one of the priorities, but I also want to talk about our priority around literacy. And thank you, Dr. Benitez, for the comments that you shared at the beginning, acknowledging the hard work that is being done by the academic team, particularly around how we began the year in ensuring that we are equipping our teachers with the resources that they need, but also equipping our administrators to make sure that everyone fully understands what this core program is and what it is not, so that we can continue with the best practice of providing ongoing feedback. So now I want to invite Keisha Red-Hannons and Jennifer Tusignan to walk us through what the implementation has looked like so far.
Good evening, board, and thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening. We'll take a quick look back as we look forward in our next few slides. If we look back at the 22-23 school year, one of the main things that we decided to do was to reorganize the literacy department. And so we, for a long time, have only had one supervisor of literacy. And this year, because we needed a laser-like focus on literacy, we divided the supervisor of literacy position into two positions. And so we have an elementary supervisor as well as a secondary supervisor. Our elementary supervisor is Miss Jennifer Tusignan. You will hear from her shortly. And our secondary ELA supervisor is Dr. Sanal Swingler. In addition to reorganizing the office, we also conducted a program review, a very extensive program review, where we piloted programs in multiple schools. And after the pilot, we selected K-5 HMH into reading and Arriba la Lectura for our core literacy program. Materials were ordered and purchased. Materials were delivered to the schools by the end of June 2023, because we knew we wanted to start the year running. We also held, prior to the end of the academic year, a virtual 2-hour overview for all staff, K-5 staff, on the materials on the K-5 core reading program. With that said, I'll turn it over to Ms. Tusignan, our elementary reading and language arts supervisor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Red-Hannons. So over the summer, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet with each of the elementary principals in their buildings. And during that one-on-one session, we talked a bit about their literacy programs in their schools and what they hoped would happen to their literacy programs and with their literacy programs with the new core program rolling out. We also talked about any anticipated issues or problems they saw, anything that they considered to be a complex issue that they saw that they could anticipate with the new core program. This was a great opportunity for us to problem solve together so that we could ensure a really positive opening of schools along with the rollout of the core program, because we were able to work together to think through these issues that they were anticipating and work with the literacy coaches, with the principals, and it just really ended up being a very positive experience for all involved, I believe. We had new principal onboarding where I did a presentation for our new principal and her team. We also had new teacher orientation where we had all of the new elementary teachers. They had a 2-hour orientation to HMH into reading and Arriba la Lectura. We had optional professional development for teachers in June. So these were full day professional development opportunities, one in June and one in August. Any teachers that came to these ended up going into a different PD option in September. So we gave a nod to the fact that they took their summer for professional development and they went into a tier 2 level of PD when they came back to school. During the summer, I also had an opportunity to meet with both district-wide literacy coaches and school-based literacy coaches. We called a team together, and this team worked with me on HMH pacing guides. We also came up with pacing guides for our dual language programs. We linked our science units where it made sense, where it was logical to do so. We created lesson plan structures for the teachers to use. We revised the assessment calendar and we outlined 90-minute literacy blocks in our primary grades and in our upper grades. We also had an administrative overview of HMH into reading for our administrators, and that included look for documents for walkthroughs. So we went through the full implementation of this new core program. Of course, it's aligned to the science of reading. And the goal of this is fidelity to the core. Our teachers are using the materials that were purchased for them, and there is no need for them to go out and purchase on their own. They have what they need. They have 90 minutes of instruction ideally to work with. They have a 30-minute block for foundational skills and a 45-minute block outside of that 90 minutes. This is a structured literacy approach versus a balanced literacy approach. So they're going through and the instruction is extraordinarily explicit in all of the areas of literacy. And they have whole group instruction, small group instruction, literacy centers, individualized one-on-one instruction with the teacher, as well as reading it from independent book boxes on their just right levels, so on and so forth. There's also a lot of support for our multilingual learners within the program and special education resources for differentiation and intervention, both in the print materials and the online components. This is a glimpse at our 90-minute block for grades K through 3. You could see along the left-hand column, there are the 90 minutes, and then that 45-minute block at the bottom is for writing. That's outside of the 90 minutes. So there's up at the top 30 minutes for foundational skills. Then there's a structured literacy portion, including shared reading or a read aloud. They have their small group and their literacy centers. Then they have their WIN block, which is their what I need block, which is essentially their intervention or enrichment block. And then of course their time for writing. Looks very similar in grades 4 and 5, but the time allocations are a little bit different. There's not such a need for foundational skills typically in the upper grades. So the minutes come off of there and then they go into the whole group structured literacy. This is a really nice graphic to show a bit of a timeline of where we've been on the left and where we're going with professional learning. So in August, we had our full day of differentiated PD when the teachers came back. It was differentiated. They had interreading and a Arriba la Lectura for sessions for grades K through 5, whichever was of course most appropriate for them. And we had a level 1 for those who did not attend summer workshops and a level 2 for those who did attend summer workshops. Then on September 12th, we had a full day workshop for K through 5 that focused on all aspects of literacy, foundational skills, writing. We went through the tech resources. There was an assessment analysis where they were able to look at their assessment data, particularly in grades 3 through 8, actually. I know we're talking mostly about 3 through 5 here, but They looked at their assessment data and were able to plan small group instruction based on the data that they had. They also did a resource overview and guidance for evidence of high quality instruction, workshop for administrators that day. Really great feedback from that. And then classroom walkthroughs by the academic team have been conducted all through the month of September and will continue through October. And then through the year, our literacy coaches are planning with their teachers during grade level team meetings. They're holding data team meetings, modeling lessons, observing, providing feedback, looking at data with their kids to make informed decisions on instruction, and then just structured opportunities during our CIAs. We have one coming up this upcoming Monday, staff meetings, our half-day PDs, everything is focused on literacy for this year. And then, of course, we have our job embedded coaching. So we've contracted with HMH to come into our schools once per quarter for a half day in each of our elementary schools to provide coaching in our buildings, and it will be specific to the needs of that particular building, working with the principal and the coach. And I will work with them as well to decide from a menu of options what they'll do in each of the buildings. As far as progress monitoring goes, we're looking at monitoring the progress in a number of ways. So we're monitoring the progress of students, of course, and we're monitoring the core program and the implementation with Fidelity to be sure that it's doing exactly what we want it to do and what it's intended to do, which is to improve student learning and student outcomes. In order to do that, we're looking at student data and student assessments, of course. We're looking at what the teachers are doing, and we're using all of that information so that we are better able to support our teachers and our students through professional development. So one way that we're doing this is by looking at our growth measure. This is a computer adaptive assessment by HMH. It's given in grades 3 through 10, 3 times a year. We've given it to our elementary students already. In grades K through 2, it will be twice a year, winter and spring. And then it provides us with student and classroom reports, and it's aligned to the Connecticut core standards. K through 3, for those of you on the board who have been here, I know that you are well aware of the DIBELS. That's our universal screener and will continue to be our universal screener this year. Dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. It's given 3 times a year to our students in grades K through 3. In grades K and 1, it assesses phonological awareness skills. In grades 1 through 3, it assesses oral reading fluency skills and actually assesses fluency in K as well. And we'll be looking very closely at the data from previous years to see if this year over time, our students are doing better. So looking this winter from last winter to see, and previous winters to see if our students are better, are doing better, are performing better, to see if the instruction and the program and the materials that we're putting forth are making an impact. And of course, we are hoping that they are, and we think that they will.
And so finally, part of our progress monitoring, Dr. Benitez mentioned it earlier, our academic team walkthroughs. These learning walks provide us with an opportunity to see the new program in action in real time with our students. And I think we're both more than pleased to report in every classroom that we're entering, our teachers are engaging in the new core program with Fidelity, with our students. It's getting, they're going in headstrong, and we're just so proud of them for embracing the program. But I think it also speaks to the structures that we set up last year and the engagement of our teachers and administrators during our pilot. We're seeing consistency across the district at a level we have not observed before. And we're seeing students actively engage and happy reading high interest material. As you heard Ms. Tusignant mention earlier, the crosswalk with science. We were in a classroom today, a 5th grade classroom. I was able to walk over during our academic team walkthrough to the social studies supervisor and say, I want you to take a look at the materials in this book. Let's figure out clear pathways for integration. And we're able to do that because we're walking through every classroom, through classrooms in every school with the supervisors. This also, we're utilizing a rubric as we go through the classrooms to collect data for professional learning needs. So this is not a gotcha. This is for our own professional learning needs to see what do our teachers need in order to be successful. We're able to have dialogue and conversations with them. The academic team walkthroughs they're facilitated by me as the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, but we also have our elementary learning supervisor, the multilingual director and supervisor, literacy coaches are participating, as well as the assistant superintendents assigned to oversee those particular schools as well, with the principal, of course. So it's very robust to get through this schedule. As Ms. Tusignant stated, we started on September 7th, which was day 5 of school. And we're pleased to report as we entered into Brennan Rogers, which was bold to have us in there on the 5th day of school, their teachers were utilizing the core program. Our kids were excited and engaged in the classroom. And so we feel really, really good about this. And so that's where we are now as far as seeing the qualitative data and looking at the program in action. And as Ms. Tusignant reported, we'll be looking at data in winter and spring to see student outcomes.
So that
Thank
completes
you.
the presentation. So we're ready for questions.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Negron. Dr. Joyner and then Dr. Benitez.
Well, first of all, I'm glad we have 2 Jennifers and a Keisha. If you look at the background of both Jennifers, they are eminently qualified to do this work. And if they were coaches, I would say they're calling all the right plays, but we need the players to execute. So I'd like to just raise 4 issues briefly that Dr. Benitez and I will continue to press on in teaching and learning. First of all, a good learning program takes into account the 3 most important variables in learning: interest, attention, and memory, the great I am. And now educators are understanding that you can't always teach kids what you want them to learn, but you can teach them what they need to learn by tapping into their interests. And of course, attention is critically important because you cannot learn anything without paying attention to it. And you will not have learned anything unless it's stored in your procedural, episodic, or syntax vocabulary memory. So we have all those there. So we have a world-class intervention. And what we need going forward is a world-class response. And that takes me to the next areas, reading and the content areas. Students that are highly motivated are motivated to look up the words that they don't know the meaning of in the various content areas that they learn in. There's a specific vocabulary in science, math, and so on and so forth. And hopefully we can also put some of those resources going forward into math so that we have this real balance. But the biggest difference, and I'd be willing to bet that if you ask anybody on this board who grew up in a low-income family, first-generation college graduate, that the volume of independent reading that you do outside of school is the prime mover in how well you are educated. And the reason that's so important is because in almost every instance, where you have a success story like an Abby Benitez or Yesenia Rivera or Darnell Golson, it is because they were readers. And I would invite this board to have Scott Marks, the Reverend Scott Marks, come to you and talk to you about how he went from a slow reader going into high school to being one of the most articulate people in this community. If you've ever heard him speak, you'll know that he is that. And then in the case of our dual language board members, they had to be proficient in 2 languages. And by gaining that proficiency, they were twice as smart because they were smart in 2 languages. And the fact that we have 71 languages in this district, as Mr. Golson reiterated, shows you how hard it will be for us unless we can get these kids motivated to take advantage of it. So I would hope that going forward that we will have some incentives in schools, rewards and incentives for kids to read well beyond the classroom. I know that the class I taught Scott in, the kids had to read 2 to 3 books per month. And it was required. So I required that of the whole school when I was principal at Jackie Robinson. And then to put to rest some of this stuff about brain-based reading. Reading is not just based on the brain, it's based on the body, the entire body. First, you got to get that body to get up in the morning and come to school. And then you have to get that body to pay attention. And reading requires all kinds of actions from one's body. Kid has to be able to see well, to hear well. So it's not just the brain. So I really commend you for this phenomenal presentation. And this is what board meetings should be like. We're talking about substantive issues that will have an impact on our children. And we're talking about trying to create the best environment so that teachers can teach and kids can learn. So thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to this coming year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Benitez?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I want to highlight that you've been talking about HMH and mentioning the program being used in 2 languages, but I don't think that it has been clear to the public and maybe to even board members who may not be as familiarized with our biliteracy schools, how the decision to go with the program and how you're implementing the core literacy in both languages in those schools. I'm not sure that that's clear to them, and how you are providing the coaching necessary for those teachers who teach in 2 languages. And I'm talking about the reading department, not talking about strategies for multilinguals.
Yes, Dr. Benitez, you are correct that we are implementing the program in our monolingual classrooms as well as our biliteracy classrooms as well. We just did a walkthrough today at Truman, and Friday was at Clinton Avenue School, seeing the program in both a bilingual classroom and a monolingual classroom. We have the multilingual department with us, and the director and the supervisor as well. So we have their lens as part of the walkthrough to see it in action. And so the core program, one of the things that we did, and I'm glad you're lifting this over the summer, was we revised the schedule, not just in our monolingual classrooms, but in our biliteracy classrooms as well, to make sure that we held fidelity to the core program, but also we're meeting the needs of all of the individual learners, and in particular, our multilingual learners as well. And so that was a true collaborative effort between the literacy department as well as the multilingual department. So thank you, Dr. Benitez, for lifting that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Benitez and Ms. Hernandez. Dr. Negron, does that conclude your report? Oh, Mr. Wilcox. And then Mr. Goldson.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciated the presentation tonight. Really enjoyed it. I also liked hearing, some of the details of it in terms of trying to connect where appropriate with science curriculum, starting to, at least in one instance with social studies curriculum. And I think that that's, key to coordinate instruction across the curriculum is going to be key moving forward. I do look forward to hearing maybe in a teaching and learning committee, hearing as this continues to roll out and we start to see the successes and everybody has the experience with it, bringing in the voices of the teachers and the literacy coaches that are part of doing the work in terms of in the classroom to see how it's working for them. I know that those groups were instrumental in piloting the various programs and they're obviously very key in this. So I'm looking forward to that. I also think it would be great to also hear how it connects up with, I know that there was additional funding because of ESSER money, I believe, for enhancing classroom libraries, books going home with students, and then also books in the libraries themselves. I think that that's key. I firmly believe a student learns to read when they have something they want to read. At least that's been my experience with any kid I know, that's a key part of it. It's not the only thing, but it is a key thing. So looking at how that, I was just reading today in the paper about Florida libraries where they're stripping out all books where there's even LGBTQ characters in the book. I just am glad that we're in a place where we can have a wide variety of reading materials in the classrooms, going home with kids, in our libraries. So I look forward to hearing more about that. One thing I do think that would be also good to hear about at some point in the future is the parent connection, because I know in the past, before COVID, citywide parent team did have the literacy coordinator come in and talk about how to look at these scores. This is what it means. This is how we're teaching your kids. This is how you can reinforce that message, and here's some books to read to your kid. And so I do think that would be great. And like I said, I do think that this is great. I think this shows what funding can happen, because if I remember right, all of this, purchasing the new curriculum and the training is grant funded. And when we're appropriately funded with something, we're able to implement new materials, new products, just a lot of good things that happens. And so I think that that's good. And I'm glad that we were able to update these various, not just the reading curriculum K-5, but other various curriculum, science, math, et cetera, because of this. And so that's what a little funding can do. It actually is going to affect in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. Terrific presentation. To Mr. Wilcox's point about us not being Florida and Texas and some of the other states that are starting to limit the different books that our children be able to read. Let's not take that for granted. It could easily happen to us. That creep is like a disease that just grows. So we have to be diligent to make sure that we don't go to that point. I have a question that's sort of kind of related, but not really. It's why do I get this question all the time, and I hope today I get educated. Why did we stop cursive writing, teaching cursive writing? Does anyone know?
I believe it's coming back.
It's coming back.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, legislative mandates say it's coming back.
Really?
Yes.
And why? Why did they take it? Why did it stop? And why are we going back to it? What was the reasoning for adding it to?
I don't know that it
Okay,
ever
Rose?
really stopped. I think we just stopped.
Oh, okay.
A lot of districts just made it a shorter period of time that it was done until it just wasn't done.
Well, I was
Many other mandates.
I was slightly educated. I still don't understand it. I hope one day someone could tell me, because I get the question all the time from people. I appreciated the presentation. I understand you're getting ready to end your report. I see we have two financial reports. Are we going to hear this during your during your fifth note. Well, I wasn't expecting a full presentation, but it's good news that we're gonna end the budget with the last year with a small, but unaudited, but small surplus. I think that's great. But going through the report, I get to the page where they have the special funds revenue. And you see that we lost $128 million in revenue from the year to year, from 21 to 22, I guess, or is that from 22 to 23? From 21, 22 to 22, 23. My expectation is with everything again that's going on, state and federally, that's going to get even worse. So we certainly need to keep an eye on what we're doing and see if there's other ways that we could reverse this trend of. I mean, yeah, it's a stark reminder. I mean, you look at the ESSER funds, and it's a stark reminder of how spoiled we got last year, and how we have to start figuring out how to prepare for the future. Thank you, Superintendent.
Dr. LeBron, does this conclude your report?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
I
thank
had
you.
one more,
And to the
I had one more comment. if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Whitcup.
Yes, and just as a request for a future agenda item as part of the superintendent's report. In the end of the last year with the change in administrations, we didn't get end of year disciplinary data like suspensions, expulsions. And so I do think that we do need to have that information, understanding that that's last year, and I'm much more interested in about this year moving forward also, because I also know that we had a key retirement for our restorative practices person who was such a leader in that. And so I am kind of concerned as far as the student code of conduct that we are still trying to implement that. I know it's going to be an ongoing process, and I do think we need to take a look at that. And that was the suspensions, in-school suspensions, expulsions, any arrest data. And I would also request the restorative practices, since that's called for in the code of conduct, as alternatives to try to divert folks from suspensions into restoring themselves into the community. So just as a future, thank you.
Can I add to that?
Mr. Bolton?
Thank you, Madam President. I hope that data also includes where we have in-school suspension, where we don't have in-school suspension, and the reasons why some schools may not have in-school suspension. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Okay, for my report, I just have two brief items. The first, I'd like to congratulate Dr. Negron. She was recently named Assistant Superintendent of the Year by ALAS for her previous work. And for those of you who don't know, ALAS is the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. So I just want to congratulate her. My final item is just an update to let you know that our next meeting to discuss the phase 5 of the superintendent hire with McPherson and Jacobson will be on October 16th at 5:30 p.m. I dare not call it a retreat just yet, but it may turn out to be that way. I just want to make sure I have the agenda items before we call it a retreat. We were not able to meet last week because some of the items on the agenda, the final agenda that was emailed to us like the day of or the day before, were items that should have been discussed in an open session. And so we decided not to meet at all. So that meeting did not happen last week. Okay, any questions or comments? All right, and so we'll move on to the Head Start report. Mr. Wilcox.
All right, thank you. I'll try to be brief here. The Head Start Task Force did meet on on the 21st. The minutes are posted. A couple things to highlight. I think our current numbers are 296 students, and I think there's 50 pending. They're pending because of requirements with Head Start for home visits and health physicals, et cetera. But so they're working on that. We have, I think, 531 slots, so there is still plenty of space for Head Start. And I know staff are working to fill those spaces, but there are places, particularly at the Mayo School. Staff are working on the grant for reapplying for the program. So when that's posted, they are ready to go. There's also a meeting in Boston in early November. I was happy to see that various staff are going, including the superintendent, with the Head Start regional group. This is key FaceTime with the people that are evaluating the program. I think they said that there might be room for a board member to go if there was interest in the past. I know Mr. Goldson, President Rivera and I have gone, and it's very informative, and it shows Head Start that the board is engaged. But I do think that this time having our new superintendent going is going to send the message that New Haven is very engaged. And then finally, staff is working on some plans. There are some a large amount of carryover funds that we've not spent yet, and so the staff are working on plans for that. In the past, they've been doing things like outdoor classrooms that are for use by not only by Head Start students can use it, but also other classes in those schools where those are going in, playground improvements, et cetera. So they are looking at those kinds of things. Thank you. Any
Mr.
questions?
Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. 2 points. One is, I think we should send the board member to that. I think it's important for board representation to be there. I actually would nominate Mr. Wilcox, who's chair of that committee, who has been very involved in that, to go. I think it was very helpful when we were in danger of losing the program to having board members up there. I don't think we should wait till we get to that point again to be engaged like that. The other question I have is based on the news reports I've been reading about the potential funding cuts on a federal level. I keep hearing Head Start as one of the targets. Will we be affected by that?
So I don't know if we will be affected by that. Currently, we have more slots than we currently seem to be able to fill. There are a lot of requirements with Head Start, particularly around income. There's also some issues around parents report that they need before and after school programming as well. And so staff are taking a look at that. We did talk about that at the last meeting about possibilities for that, which would make it more useful for some parents to be able to do that. So I don't know if we would lose funding with that or not. That's always the danger with loss of any federal funding in any category, is that it'll affect schools like, districts like New Haven, where we can't absorb the hit. But and as far as me going to Boston, this particular meeting, my understanding the target was for people that hadn't been before. So if that would be like Dr. Benitez, Dr. Yarbrough, the mayor, et cetera. But it's a pretty tight turnaround for this. I do think that having our superintendent there, and her commitment to be there, and as well as other staff in the chain there is going to be key, especially because they always have concerns over changes in administration, and we not only had a new superintendent, we also have a new director of early childhood learning as well. And my understanding is she's planning on being there as well. So I think we'll have a good representation from New Haven.
Well, I think having the superintendent and the mayor there would really send a message, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Citywide School Building Committee report.
I'll be brief on this. We did meet on the September 14th. We had updates on several capital projects around the district. I did take a look today. It doesn't look like the report was posted, so just a request to staff to have that report posted, because it is informative, and I invite everybody to take a look for it in a day or two when it is there, because it'll just show all the various capital projects and things happening around the district.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Questions or comments from Mr. Wilcox? Okay, finance and operations.
And finally, Finance and Operations Committee, we did meet last year, as Mr. Goldson alluded to. Ms. Hannons, our Chief Financial Officer, did do an end-of-year presentation and reports an unaudited surplus of just over $25,000. She cautions that that could change, just as because it is unaudited, but that looks like, if I remember correctly, this is the 4th year our general funds budget has come in with a very small surplus, a tiny surplus when you consider the size of the amount. And I know that that is 2 reasons for that. One is hard work on staff to find those cuts, but I think one of the negative reasons for it is that curtails a lot of programming, things we weren't able to do, staff we weren't able to maybe hire, or bring people in at a higher step level when we do our hiring, et cetera. So it's a lot of work, but it also has a real hit. So it's good that we're able to do that, but it is, just underscores the requirements for one of the richest states in this country to fully fund their schools. I'll also mention, we did start to take a look at the August financial report. Things are very, just at the very beginning of the year, but we'll be able to have budget deficit mitigation numbers, that targets that we are going to take a look at. So she wasn't able to provide those yet. It's just too early in the year. We typically aren't seeing those numbers until, I think, late November, early November, before they're really able to forecast exactly where things are going to be. And then finally, just did mention that we did have a good meeting prior to that on around Series 3000 policies related to student data privacy, information security, and so on, as we are continuing on updating our Series 3000 policies. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from Mr. Wilcox? Okay, we'll move on to the governance report. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Benitez?
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair and board members. We met on 9/20 at a special meeting, and we were able to identify the policies that other committees had reviewed and had submitted to the governance committee. We had over 15 policies submitted. However, we have moved forward only 9 at this point. The ones that we have not moved forward were ones that we had questions from members of the committee, or that we identified other members of the staff that needed to weigh in any questions we had about it. You should all have in your packets 9 new updated policies. They are for the first reading. I want to highlight P3280, which is gifts, grants, and bequests. There's a whole section that was crossed out but not eliminated, because we need everyone to read this one and give us feedback. We do believe that crowdfunding is an important part of what happens in our schools. We just need to make sure that we all agree that whether we need to define it and regulate it more, or that we continue to let it be pretty loose, even though there's some monitoring. So we need board members to to pay close attention to that and let us know before we go for the second reading if there's a strong opinion about one thing or the other. In addition to that, we have submitted food service, school lunch service, and food service facilities, food service, school food, safety inspections, and safety programs. We also have submitted free or reduced price lunches policy. So you have in front of you policies that are important for you to read carefully and send us any feedback as soon as you can. The following group of policies that we included are student publications, that's 6145.3. And we also have in front of you in the student publication, it's A and B. And we also have instruction and school productions. Within the instructional piece, the specific policy 6145.4 talks about school productions. These are things that we hope you take a look, and if you have any concerns, let us know right away. We also have 6161.1, which is also an instruction, but this is evaluation of instructional materials. This is one policy that our staff really uses and needs to have available to them as an updated. We've done a little bit of changes, but I believe that the board will be pleased with the changes. However, I would like for everyone to really pay attention to these items so that when our staff take a look at materials that we are purchasing, they have the right policy in front of them. In addition, we have a policy number 6146.2. This one is a statewide proficiency mastery examination. It's a pretty much a very straightforward policy. You have the ones that are with the lines over them. The supervisors may have thought the one without the lines over is a better example. But we included both just so if anybody had any questions on that. The staff also made additions to this policy if they found that the recommendation was lacking information that is very important to our own population. For example, multilinguals or any groups that we have in our schools that may have not been mentioned in what we receive. The last one that you have here is adult and continuing education program, the policy on it, and that is P6200. I believe those are the ones that you have. If you have any questions for our committee, please send them to us as soon as possible. And if you have recommendations, strong recommendations, please do send them to us as soon as possible so we are ready for a second reading, if possible, our next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Questions or comments for Dr. Benitez? Mr. Golton?
I think Mr. Wilcox was first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the hand. Mr. Wilcox?
Thank you. Just a clarification on the P3280 that I'd like to say, just because it originated from the Finance and Operations Committee. It's the intention there was not that we don't need a policy related to crowdfunding, just that we probably need to have a separate policy because we need to have conversations not only with the administration, but with building leaders and with teachers and, folks that are engaged in that, and tread carefully, just to make sure that we're having the accountability around when people are using the district's name for fundraising, but also the flexibility, since we do know that these are raising very needed funds for very direct classroom support. So it's the intention of the Finance and Operations Committee is to work on a separate crowdfunding policy to present to the Governance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Golson? Did Dr.
think,
Benitez, did you have a?
I think Dr. Benitez
Go ahead.
wanted to respond to that. I'd like to hear it.
So what you are saying is that indeed we will have in front of us a policy that may have a different numbering and only gifts that are acquired through crowdfunding.
Yes.
Thank
Like
you.
it would be, for instance, P 3280.1 or something like that,
Right.
because it is related to gifts, grants, or bequests, but we didn't want to send this through now because we needed to have more work done with talking to the folks that I've already mentioned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Wilcox partially answered my question. I was wondering why all this red was here. But I have one question and one comment. One is, does this policy still allow for crowdfunding at this time? Even though we cross out this crowdfunding section, it doesn't eliminate schools being able to crowdfund at this point, does it? That's not how I read it, so.
That's not how I read it.
Okay, so it does not eliminate
No,
that.
and the intention when we talked about this in Finance and Operations was not to say no one can do that. It's to say we need to consider that separately after we've done the work of talking to the folks that are utilizing that.
And P 3280, is that a new policy or are we amending a policy at this point?
Is I believe that we have a policy on gifts, but this one is why you always ask me this very difficult question.
The reason why I'm asking the question, is because I do remember seeing a policy before when we were going through amending all our policies in the past. And I do remember that there was something in there about it starting at the principal level and getting additional approval from the superintendent. And from this policy, it doesn't look like it does that. So I'm wondering why we took the principal's input out of receiving gifts or doing fundraising.
Okay,
Doing fundraising more than anything.
It's saying that the superintendent of schools shall set up criteria to be met in the acceptance of gifts. So I think what this policy is doing is allowing the superintendent at this point to come up with the structure of what you just described.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And if, again, remember that the first reading, you can always say we should add something of this sort, but in this way, if the superintendent decides that not only does she want the principal to be engaged in this, but may need a supervisor, a curriculum supervisor who's impacted the area where the gifts is coming to, they are able to do that. They're not bound by just one layer.
I trust that our award-winning former assistant superintendent will do the right thing around making sure that the school communities are involved in those decisions. I'm just wondering when she's not here and when we have another superintendent, how do we have some control over that to make sure that that principals and school, like PTAs and so on, are able to have some kind of input into that process.
Thank you, Mr. Golson.
Thank you,
Madam
Dr.
President?
Benitez. Mr. Golson?
Before we go into executive session, I just, there was a question that I had to ask the superintendent during her report that I forgot to do. So before we move into executive session, I'd like to be able to ask those quick questions.
Yeah, go ahead. Let me just ask really quick. Does anyone have their food service task group report in absence of Dr. Yarborough? No. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Golson.
Thank you for allowing me. I know that we approved contracts with the city to agreements with the city to hire both legal and finance purchasing. I thought the legal was just adding more money to the contract. Now I've heard over the grapevine that Mr. Alexiadis is going to be doing something else at Corp Council, and that we're looking to hire someone to replace him. Well, not us. Well, I don't know if it's us or Corp Council that's actually doing the hiring and the interviewing and hiring. So I'd like to know where we are in that process. And secondly, I know that we also approved a position for finance/purchasing, and where are we in that process also?
I'm going to invite my director of HR to chime in on where we are in the process.
Good evening. This is Lisa Flegler. Mr. Golson, can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry, I was multitasking.
Two things. One is legal. I understand that I'd like to know what the process is for hiring a replacement for Mr. Alexiadis. If that's happening, I'm not sure if that, I heard that was happening. I don't know if that's happening. So can you confirm or deny whether that's happening? And if so, and if it is happening, what the process is? And secondly, it was legal and in the finance purchasing department staffer also.
So we are still working through first, let me speak on the staff attorney that to replace Attorney Alexiadis. So that information has been shared with HR and Mr. Lamb. And so we're waiting for Mr. Lamb to move forward with next steps, interacting with the superintendent. And so once we get that information back from Mr. Lamb, we can proceed to start the interview to replace Attorney Alexiadis. And with regards to the procurement position for purchasing, it is still in process, working with the city. Mr. Gormley is leading that. We are waiting just to decide when we're going to start the interview process, but that is a process that has to be approved by the Civil Service Board, but position has been approved, and we're just waiting to schedule the interview.
So that's a city position.
Well, it is a city civil service tested position, which is going to be housed at on the Board of Education side. It's been, because of the charter, it has to be hired through the city, but it will be a position that will sit on the Board of Education side.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I understand. Okay.
Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. All right, and with that, I'll move that we go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 12006B, pending claims, and C, security regarding update on status of cyber theft investigation and security.
Who else will be in that?
Attorney Alexiadis, Dr. Negron. Do we need Mr. Lamb, Dr. Negron?
I had requested Gilda Herrera to join us in
Okay.
the executive session.
And Madam President,
So Attorney,
Madam President, Chet Sawicki, the head of city IT, is going to join on Zoom as well, please.
okay, so Chet Suwicki, Attorney Alexiadis, Gilda Herrera, and Dr. Negron. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion, Attorney Alexiadis?
I know that someone asked about Mr. Lamb, and I didn't know if that question was answered.
I
That's
think
all.
I think she mentioned Ms. Gilda Herrera. So Mr. Lamb does not need to come in.
No, it'll be Gilda Herrera.
Okay. Thank you. It's been properly seconded. Any other questions or comments, discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote to go into executive session. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. And Viviana Camacho emailed the executive session link.
gonna stay this cold all day?
I don't know. To be honest with you.
They got the fans on top of it.
God, it's freezing here.
We have enough people to adjourn.
We do, but.
No, we're getting better.
You imagine they come back into the room and it's like, oh, we're gone.
And this was a good meeting because we talked about everything that matters.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so we are out of executive session, back in regular session. There were no votes taken in executive session. And since that's the last item on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Okay, we'll vote to end this meeting. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson.
Yes, but was there a second to his motion?
Yes, there was.
Yes.
Oh. All right.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Sleep tight.